Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, watching the stars drift past the viewing screen. His ship was not built for war but for discovery and the peaceful exploration of unknown worlds. For 3 years he had led his crew through the outer reaches of human space, collecting samples and mapping new star systems. The work was quiet and rewarding and exactly what Jake had always wanted to do since he was a boy dreaming of space travel. Dr. Lisa Carter worked at her science station running scans of the planet they had discovered 2 days ago. The world was beautiful with blue oceans and green continents that reminded everyone of Earth. Lisa had been studying the strange energy, readings coming from the surface, and she believed they had found something incredible. Her excitement was obvious as she called out readings to the rest of the bridge crew. Security Chief Alex Hunter checked the ship systems from his position near the tactical console. Alex was a former military man who had joined the exploration service because he wanted to see the galaxy in peace, rather than through the scope of a weapon. He kept the ship safe but hoped he would never need to use the few defensive weapons the Horizon carried. Engineer Kevin Barnes monitored the engine systems from the lower decks. Kevin loved machines and had spent his entire career making ships run better and faster. He had modified the Horizon engines to be quieter and more efficient than standard models. The ship could slip through space almost undetected, which made it perfect for their scientific work. Communications Officer Amanda Price sat at her station listening to the background chatter of space. She could speak 12 languages and had studied alien communication theories at the Academy. Amanda dreamed of being the first human to have a real conversation with an alien species. She monitored all frequencies hoping to catch some sign that they were not alone in the universe. The planet below them seemed empty of intelligent life, but Lisa readings suggested otherwise. Ancient structures appeared on the deep scans and energy patterns that looked almost like technology. Jake had decided they would land tomorrow and take a closer look. The crew was excited about the possibility of finding their first alien artifacts. Amanda suddenly straightened at her station and held up her hand for silence. She had caught something on the long-range sensors. A ship was approaching their position and it was big, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. The vessel appeared on their screens like a dark mountain floating through space. Jake ordered all stations to yellow alert and tried to open communication channels. The alien ship did not respond to any of their signals. It simply moved closer with slow, deliberate movements that seemed almost predatory. Alex powered up their few defensive systems, but everyone knew they would be useless against something so massive. The alien vessel finally responded, but not with words. A tractor beam locked onto the Horizon and pulled them toward the larger ship. Jake ordered full power to engines, but Kevin reported they could not break free. They were being drawn inside what appeared to be a massive docking bay that could hold dozens of ships their size. As they were pulled inside, Jake got his first look at the aliens who had captured them. They were tall and thin with gray skin and large dark eyes. They wore elaborate uniforms that suggested a military organization. Their movements were precise and coordinated like they had done this many times before. The aliens boarded the Horizon without asking permission. They moved through the ship with weapons drawn and expressions of complete contempt. Their leader was taller than the others, with decorations that marked him as someone important. He spoke in perfect English, which surprised everyone. High Commander Vextar introduced himself and explained that humans were now prisoners of the Zephyrian Empire. He told Jake that humans were a primitive species that had ventured too far from their homeworld. The galaxy belonged to superior races and humans would learn their proper place or be destroyed. Jake tried to explain that they were explorers, not invaders, but Vextar showed no interest in listening. The alien commander seemed to view humans the same way humans might view insects. He ordered his soldiers to scan all of the ship systems and download their navigation data. Lisa Carter stepped forward and tried to appeal to what she hoped was the alien scientific curiosity. She explained their research mission and offered to share their discoveries. Vextar looked at her with what appeared to be amusement and told her that human science was thousands of years behind Zephyrian knowledge. Alex Hunter remained calm, but Jake could see his security chief calculating distances and weapons positions. There were too many aliens and they were too well armed for any resistance to succeed. The crew of the Horizon could only watch as their ship was searched and their computers were accessed. Amanda Price tried to send a distress signal, but the aliens had jammed all communications. She reported quietly to Jake that they were completely cut off from human space. No one would know what had happened to them or where to look for them. The situation became much worse when Vextar received a message from one of his subordinates. The alien commander listened to the report and then turned to Jake with an expression of cruel satisfaction. He explained that Zephyrian forces had detected a human colony ship heading toward this system. The colony ship was called New Hope and carried 50,000 human civilians, including families and children. They were traveling to establish a new settlement on a world 3 systems away. The ship was completely defenseless and had no idea that aliens existed in this part of space. Vextar told Jake that the colony ship would serve as an example to the rest of humanity. The Zephyrians would destroy the vessel and broadcast the images throughout human space. This would show all humans what happened to species that tried to expand beyond their proper boundaries. Jake begged Vextar to spare the innocent people on the colony ship. He offered to surrender himself and his crew if the aliens would let the colonists pass safely. Lisa Carter supported him and explained that the families on that ship had done nothing wrong and posed no threat to anyone. The alien commander refused to listen to any appeals for mercy. He explained that weakness was the reason humans would never be allowed to join the galactic community. Species that could not protect themselves did not deserve to survive and expand among the stars. As Jake watched in horror, the alien fleet moved to intercept the approaching colony ship. The human families aboard New Hope had no warning and no chance to escape. They were traveling in peaceful sleep, completely unaware that death was approaching them through the darkness of space. The destruction of the New Hope colony ship sent shockwaves through every human settlement in known space. The images broadcast by the Zephyrians showed 50,000 innocent people dying in the cold vacuum as their ship was torn apart by alien weapons. Men, women, and children who had been dreaming of new homes and better lives were murdered without warning or mercy. President Laura Stone stood before the United Earth Council in the Great Assembly Hall that had once echoed with speeches about peace and cooperation among the stars. Today, her words carried a different message as she addressed representatives from every human world and station. The attack on New Hope had awakened something deep in the human spirit that their enemies had not expected to find. Stone spoke quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of human space through the communication networks that connected their scattered worlds. She explained that the Zephyrians had made a fundamental mistake in their understanding of human nature. They had assumed that a peaceful species would remain peaceful when faced with the murder of their families and friends. Admiral Ryan Brooks received immediate authorization to mobilize every military vessel in human space. The Earth Defense Force had always been small because humans had never encountered hostile alien life. Most of their ships were designed for exploration and patrol duties rather than actual warfare. That would have to change, and change quickly. Brooks began issuing orders that transformed the entire human fleet overnight. Research vessels were fitted with weapons systems. Cargo haulers were converted into troop transports. Even luxury passenger liners were stripped down and rebuilt as support ships for the coming war effort. Tony Rodriguez had been enjoying his retirement on the agricultural world of Harmony when the news arrived. The former Marine had served 20 years in the Earth Defense Force before settling down to grow crops and raise his daughter, Maria. The colony ship attack changed everything, because Maria had been visiting friends on a research station that was now directly in the path of the advancing Zephyrian fleet. Rodriguez contacted every veteran he knew, and within days they had formed volunteer units that could supplement the regular military forces. These men and women had training and experience that would be valuable in the coming fight. More importantly, they had personal reasons to ensure that humanity survived this threat. Susan Walsh worked in the weapons development laboratories on Luna Station, where she had spent years designing defensive systems for space installations. The day after the colony ship massacre, she received unlimited funding and authorization to develop anything that might give humanity an advantage against superior alien technology. Walsh began working 18-hour days with her team of engineers and scientists. They studied every piece of data available about Zephyrian ships and weapons, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. Human technology was less advanced, but humans had always been good at finding creative solutions to impossible problems. Ben Thompson had been the lead diplomatic envoy in the first contact protocols that humans had developed for meeting alien species. He had spent years studying how to communicate with unknown forms of life, and how to avoid misunderstandings that might lead to conflict. The Zephyrians had made diplomacy impossible by choosing murder over communication. Thompson redirected his knowledge toward intelligence gathering and strategic planning. He coordinated with human agents throughout the galaxy to gather information about Zephyrian movements and capabilities. Every piece of data they could collect might save lives when the fighting began. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew remained prisoners aboard the Zephyrian command ship, but they were not idle. Alex Hunter had been quietly studying the alien security systems and guard rotations. Amanda Price was learning the Zephyrian language by listening to their communications. Lisa Carter was analyzing every piece of alien technology she could observe. The humans were beginning to demonstrate their most dangerous characteristic, which was their ability to adapt and learn from any situation. Even as prisoners, they were gathering intelligence and planning for eventual escape. The Zephyrians had expected them to be broken by witnessing the destruction of New Hope, but instead, the crew of the Horizon had become more determined than ever. Dr. Carter had personal reasons for her dedication to the resistance effort. Her husband and 2 young children had been aboard the New Hope when the aliens destroyed it. She had watched the recordings of the attack over and over until she had memorized every detail of the Zephyrian weapons and tactics. The loss of her family had changed Lisa from a peaceful scientist into someone who understood that sometimes violence was the only response to violence. She began planning ways to turn her knowledge of biology and chemistry into weapons that could be used against their captors. Throughout human space, ordinary people were making similar transformations. Farmers were learning to operate military equipment. Teachers were training to become intelligence analysts. Children were contributing to the war effort by helping with communications and data processing. The human response surprised many of their own leaders who had expected panic and surrender in the face of superior alien technology. Instead, they found a species that became more dangerous when cornered, and more creative when faced with impossible odds. Mining operations in the asteroid belts were converted into weapons manufacturing facilities. The same equipment used to extract resources from space rocks could be modified to build missiles and ammunition. Human ingenuity was turning every tool and every facility into part of the war machine. Medical stations began developing treatments for combat injuries they hoped they would never need to use. Agricultural worlds started producing rations and supplies for military operations. Even the most peaceful human settlements were finding ways to contribute to the defense of their species. The Zephyrians had broadcast their attack on New Hope as a demonstration of their power and a warning to humanity to surrender. Instead, they had given humans something they had never had before, which was a common enemy that united every settlement and every individual in a shared cause. High Commander Vextar began receiving reports from his scouts about unusual activity in human space. Ships were moving in new patterns, and human colonies were showing increased energy signatures that suggested military preparations. The alien commander was not concerned because he believed human technology was too primitive to pose any real threat. Vextar made plans to attack the major human worlds and force a quick surrender before the humans could organize any significant resistance. He expected the war to last only a few months at most. After all, what could a primitive species do against the advanced technology and superior tactics of the Zephyrian Empire? The alien commander would soon learn that he had made the same mistake that many others had made throughout human history. He had confused peaceful intentions with weakness and technological inferiority with inability to fight. Humans had always been peaceful by choice rather than necessity, and when that choice was taken away, they became something entirely different. As the first Zephyrian attack fleets moved toward human space, they were heading toward a confrontation that would reshape the balance of power in their region of the galaxy. The aliens thought they were attacking a weak species that would collapse at the first sign of serious resistance. Instead, they were about to discover what humans became when they had nothing left to lose. 6 months after the massacre of New Hope, the galaxy had learned that humanity possessed something their enemies had not expected to encounter. Every human settlement had been transformed from peaceful communities into military strongholds bristling with weapons and defended by people who had nothing left to lose. Captain Jake Morrison now commanded a fleet of 12 converted vessels that bore little resemblance to the exploration ships they had once been. The USS Horizon had been rebuilt with armor plating and weapon systems that would have been unthinkable before the war began. Morrison himself had changed from a peaceful explorer into a battle-tested commander who understood that mercy was a luxury his species could no longer afford. His crew had evolved alongside their ship and their mission. Dr. Lisa Carter had become the fleet expert on biological weapons designed specifically to target Zephyrian physiology. Her laboratory aboard the flagship produced toxins and diseases that could disable alien crews without damaging their valuable technology. Carter worked with a cold efficiency that would have shocked her former colleagues. The woman who had once dedicated her life to preserving and studying life now spent her days finding new ways to destroy it. The death of her family had burned away everything soft in her personality, leaving only determination and scientific precision. Alex Hunter led boarding parties that specialized in capturing Zephyrian vessels intact. His security teams had learned to move through alien ships like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Hunter had studied every recording of Zephyrian tactics and turned their own methods against them. The humans had discovered that their enemies relied heavily on technology and standard procedures. When faced with tactics they had never encountered, the Zephyrians became confused and made mistakes. Human unpredictability was proving to be a significant advantage in close-quarters combat. Engineer Kevin Barnes had become a master of reverse engineering alien technology. Every piece of Zephyrian equipment that fell into human hands was studied and improved upon within days. Barnes had developed modifications that made human ships faster and more maneuverable than their alien counterparts. The engineering teams worked around the clock to upgrade their fleet with captured technology. They discovered that Zephyrian designs prioritized efficiency over durability. Human modifications made the alien systems more robust and reliable under combat conditions. Amanda Price now coordinated intelligence operations across multiple star systems. Her language skills and understanding of alien communication had made her invaluable for intercepting Zephyrian messages and coordinating with resistance cells throughout occupied space. She had learned to think like the enemy in order to anticipate their movements. Price had established communication networks that the aliens could not detect or decode. Human resistance fighters used these channels to share intelligence and coordinate attacks across dozens of worlds. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their plans before they made them. Commander Zexhai of the Zephyrian Third Fleet had been assigned to crush human resistance in the outer colonies. He had expected to complete this mission within weeks, but instead found himself engaged in a grinding campaign against an enemy that refused to follow any recognizable pattern of behavior. Human ships appeared without warning to attack supply convoys and then vanished before Zephyrian reinforcements could arrive. Colonies that appeared defenseless suddenly bristled with hidden weapons when alien landing forces approached. Captured human prisoners either escaped through seemingly impossible means or died before revealing any useful information. Zexhai began filing reports, with high command describing tactics and behavior that seemed almost irrational by Zephyrian standards. Humans would sacrifice their own lives to destroy alien equipment, even when the strategic value was minimal. They fought with a desperation and creativity that made them far more dangerous than their technology suggested. The commander requested additional forces but was told that other fronts were experiencing similar problems. Humanity had not collapsed under the weight of superior technology as predicted. Instead, they had adapted and were learning to use Zephyrian advantages against them. Tony Rodriguez led ground forces on the contested world of New Barcelona, where Zephyrian occupation troops were discovering that controlling human populations was more difficult than destroying them. Rodriguez had trained civilian volunteers in guerrilla warfare tactics that turned every building and every street into a potential battleground. The resistance fighters used improvised weapons and homemade explosives to attack alien patrols. They moved through underground tunnels and maintenance systems that the Zephyrians had not known existed. Rodriguez coordinated these activities while simultaneously planning larger operations against alien command centers. Susan Walsh had revolutionized human weapons technology by focusing on systems that could be manufactured quickly and maintained easily in field conditions. Her designs prioritized reliability and effectiveness over sophistication. Human weapons were becoming more deadly. Even as they became simpler to produce, Walsh had developed kinetic weapons that could penetrate Zephyrian shields and explosive devices that turned captured alien equipment into booby traps. Her teams worked in hidden laboratories scattered across human space, producing weapons and sharing designs through encrypted communication networks. Ben Thompson coordinated intelligence operations that tracked Zephyrian fleet movements and identified high-value targets for attack. His network of agents and informants had grown to include sympathizers from other alien species who had suffered under Zephyrian occupation. Thompson discovered that the Zephyrian Empire was not as unified as it appeared. Several subject species were beginning to question their loyalty to an empire that seemed to be losing control of a primitive human uprising. This intelligence opened new possibilities for undermining alien cohesion. The turning point came when Morrison Fleet intercepted a Zephyrian command vessel carrying High Commander Vextar himself. The alien leader had been traveling between occupied worlds when human ships emerged from behind a planetary ring system and surrounded his escort fleet. The battle was brief, but decisive. Human ships used captured alien weapons alongside their own modified systems to overwhelm the Zephyrian defenses. Vextar's ship was disabled and boarded before it could self-destruct. The High Commander found himself a prisoner of the species he had considered beneath notice. Morrison faced his former captor across the briefing table of the horizon and explained how dramatically the situation had changed. Humanity had learned from every encounter with Zephyrian forces. They had studied alien weaknesses and developed tactics specifically designed to exploit them. Vextar demanded to know how a primitive species had managed to capture him and destroy his escort fleet. Morrison smiled grimly and explained that the aliens had made a fundamental error in their assumptions about human nature. They had confused technological inferiority with inability to learn and adapt. The High Commander realized for the first time that his species might have awakened something dangerous in their attack on the New Hope. Humans were proving to be far more resilient and creative than anyone had expected. They learned from every defeat and turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. As news of Vextar capture spread throughout human space, the resistance efforts intensified. People who had been hiding in fear began to believe that victory might be possible. The capture of the alien commander proved that the Zephyrians could be beaten by human determination and ingenuity. The war was entering a new phase where humans would no longer be defending against alien attacks. They were ready to take the fight to the enemy and show the galaxy what happened when a peaceful species was pushed beyond the limits of tolerance. 2 years into the war, humanity had accomplished something that no Zephyrian strategist had thought possible. They had not only survived the initial alien assault, but had pushed the invaders back to defensive positions throughout contested space. What had begun as a war of extinction had become a campaign of human advancement across previously unknown regions of the galaxy. Admiral Ryan Brooks stood in the command center of the massive space station that had become the headquarters for all human military operations. The facility had been built from the salvaged remains of destroyed Zephyrian ships and expanded using techniques learned from captured alien technology. Brooks now commanded the largest fleet in human history, and he was preparing to use it. The fleet assembled around the command station included vessels from every human world and colony. Military ships sailed alongside converted civilian craft that had been transformed into weapons of war. Mining ships had become missile platforms, and passenger liners had been rebuilt as troop transports and mobile hospitals. Colonel Sarah Mitchell had traded her archaeological tools for weapons and tactical gear, but her scientific training served her well in her new role as a ground forces commander. Mitchell had developed urban warfare techniques that allowed human soldiers to fight effectively in the strange environments of alien worlds and space stations. Her forces had learned to use Zephyrian architecture against its builders. The aliens designed their structures for efficiency and function, but humans found ways to turn every corridor and chamber into a battlefield advantage.
Mitchell troops moved through alien facilities like they had built them
themselves. Lieutenant Danny Cooper led fighter squadrons that had mastered three-dimensional combat in the complex environments around space stations and asteroid fields. Cooper had been a civilian pilot before the war, but his natural flying ability and willingness to take calculated risks made him a natural leader in combat situations. Human pilots had learned to outfly their alien counterparts through sheer determination and creative tactics. Zephyrian fighters were superior in speed and weapons, but human pilots were willing to attempt maneuvers that their enemies considered too dangerous to try. Dr. Helen Parker worked in research, facilities that had been established in captured alien installations throughout human-controlled space. Parker had developed weapon systems that used Zephyrian technology in ways its creators had never imagined. Her innovations had given human forces capabilities that surprised even their own commanders. Parker teams had learned to reprogram alien artificial intelligence systems and turn them against their original users. Zephyrian ships found their own computers working to disable their weapons and shields. The aliens discovered that their reliance on automated systems had become a critical weakness. High Commander Vexter remained a prisoner aboard the flagship, but his captivity had taught him more about human nature than years of studying intelligence reports. He watched through the viewing ports as human fleets prepared for what appeared to be a massive offensive operation. The scale of the mobilization impressed even someone who had commanded fleets across multiple star systems. Vextar had tried to negotiate with his captors, but Captain Morrison had rejected every offer of compromise or limited peace. The human commander explained that the war would continue until the Zephyrian Empire was no longer capable of threatening any human settlement anywhere in the galaxy. The alien leader realized that humans were not fighting for territory or resources, but for the complete security of their species. They would not stop until they were satisfied that no human child would ever again face the threat that had destroyed the New Hope colony ship. Morrison had indeed changed from the peaceful explorer who had been captured 2 years earlier. His face showed the lines and scars of extended combat operations, but his eyes held a determination that had only grown stronger with each battle. He commanded his fleet with a combination of tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness that had proven devastating to enemy forces. The human fleet began its advance toward the Zephyrian home systems with overwhelming force and superior technology that had been captured and improved upon during 2 years of constant warfare. Brooks had planned a campaign that would strike at the heart of alien power and force a final resolution to the conflict. Intelligence reports indicated that several other alien species were watching the war with growing interest. Some had been subjects of the Zephyrian Empire and were beginning to consider whether human victory might offer them opportunities for independence. Others were concerned about what humanity might become if they succeeded in destroying such a powerful enemy. The first major engagement occurred at the Nexus station, which controlled shipping routes between 6 star systems. The station was defended by the largest Zephyrian fleet that humans had ever faced, but Brooks had prepared for this confrontation by bringing every available ship and weapon system. The battle lasted for 3 days as human forces systematically dismantled the alien defenses. Mitchell ground forces captured the station level by level, while Cooper squadrons eliminated enemy fighters and bombers. Parker weapons systems disabled alien ships faster than they could withdraw from the combat zone. When the fighting ended, the Nexus station was under human control and the Zephyrian fleet had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing toward their home territory. The victory demonstrated that humanity now possessed both the technology and the tactical expertise to defeat any force the aliens could deploy against them. News of the victory reached Zephyr Prime, where the alien government was struggling to understand how their superior civilization had been reduced to desperate defensive measures. Leaders who had once planned the conquest of human space now found themselves preparing for the defense of their own worlds. The Zephyrian Council of Commanders attempted to negotiate through intermediaries from neutral alien species, but human representatives refused to consider any settlement that left the Empire capable of future aggression. Humanity had learned that half measures and limited victories only postponed the next war. President Stone addressed the United Earth Council and explained that the war would continue until humanity could be certain that no future generation would face the choice between slavery and extinction. The Zephyrians had started a war they could not win, and now they would face the consequences of their actions. Brooks received authorization to proceed with the final phase of the campaign, which would carry human forces directly to the alien home system. The fleet that departed from Nexus Station included ships and personnel from every branch of human, military, and civilian services. Vextar watched the preparations for the final assault and realized that his species had made a critical error in their understanding of the balance of power in their region of space. They had assumed that superior technology guaranteed military victory, but humans had demonstrated that determination and adaptability could overcome almost any advantage. The former High Commander requested one final meeting with Morrison before the fleet reached Zephyr Prime. He wanted to understand how a peaceful exploration mission had evolved into the force that was about to destroy his civilization. Morrison explained that humans had never wanted to be conquerors or warriors, but the destruction of New Hope had forced them to become something they had never intended to be. The aliens had awakened capabilities that humanity had hoped never to use, and now those capabilities would determine the final outcome of the war. The human fleet approached the Zephyrian home system. Vextar understood that his species had learned too late that peaceful people could become the most dangerous enemies when they were pushed beyond the limits of patience and forgiveness. The war was about to end, but the galaxy would never again underestimate the potential of humanity. The final battle for Zephyr Prime began 3 years after the destruction of the New Hope colony ship, when the largest human fleet ever assembled emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the alien home system. Admiral Brooks commanded more than 2,000 vessels ranging from massive battleships built with captured technology to small fighters piloted by volunteers who had lost everything to the war. Captain Morrison watched from the bridge of his flagship as the Zephyrian defense fleet moved to intercept the human advance. The alien ships were sleek and powerful, but they faced an enemy that had spent years studying their weaknesses and developing tactics specifically designed to exploit them. The human fleet had been organized into strike groups that could operate independently while supporting each other in complex battle situations. Morrison commanded the primary assault force, while other groups prepared to attack key installations throughout the star system. Dr. Lisa Carter monitored the deployment of biological weapons that had been designed to disable Zephyrian crews without destroying their ships. Her research teams had developed agents that could spread through alien life support systems and render entire crews unconscious within minutes. The weapons were delivered by missiles that appeared to be conventional explosives. Carter felt no satisfaction in watching her creations work against living beings, but she remembered her family aboard the New Hope and understood that this war would not end until one species or the other was completely defeated. The Zephyrians had chosen the terms of this conflict when they broadcast the murder of 50,000 civilians. Alex Hunter led boarding parties that specialized in capturing critical enemy vessels intact. His teams had practiced their techniques on dozens of alien ships and had learned to move through Zephyrian vessels like they had designed them. Hunter's soldiers struck fast and disappeared before the enemy could organize effective resistance. The boarding operations were essential to the human strategy because they needed to capture alien leaders and technical specialists who could provide information about other enemy forces. Hunter had become expert at identifying high-value targets and extracting them before they could destroy sensitive data. Engineer Kevin Barnes coordinated the technical aspects of the assault, including electronic warfare systems that could disable alien computers and communication networks. Barnes had learned to think like Zephyrian programmers and could anticipate their defensive measures and countermeasures. Human ships carried virus programs that could infect alien networks and turn their own systems against them. Barnes watched as Zephyrian vessels lost control of their weapons and shields at critical moments in the battle. The aliens found themselves fighting their own technology as well as human forces. Amanda Price managed communication networks that coordinated the activities of thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of personnel scattered across the entire star system. Her systems had been designed to function even under heavy enemy jamming and electronic attack. Price had established backup communication methods that used everything from laser pulses to physical message drones. The human fleet maintained perfect coordination even when primary systems were damaged or destroyed. The aliens discovered that human redundancy made their communication networks almost impossible to disrupt. General Chris Taylor commanded ground forces that were preparing to assault the surface of Zephyr Prime if the space battle went according to plan. Taylor had trained his soldiers to fight in alien environments and had equipped them with weapons and equipment captured from previous battles. The ground forces would be responsible for securing key installations and preventing the aliens from destroying critical infrastructure or technical data. Taylor understood that the final victory would require occupying enemy territory and controlling their industrial capacity. Admiral Patricia Lewis coordinated the orbital bombardment systems that would be used if the aliens refused to surrender after their fleet was defeated. Lewis had prepared targeting solutions for every major military installation and industrial facility on the planet's surface. The bombardment would be precise and limited to military targets, but it would be devastating enough to convince any surviving alien leaders that continued resistance was futile. Lewis hoped that the threat alone would be sufficient to force surrender. High Commander Vextar remained under guard aboard Morrison flagship, but he had been allowed to observe the battle through the ship communication systems. The former alien leader watched as human forces systematically destroyed everything his species had built over centuries of conquest and expansion. Vextar finally understood the magnitude of the mistake his people had made when they decided to exterminate humanity, rather than negotiate or ignore them. The species they had dismissed as primitive had proven capable of learning and adapting faster than any enemy the Zephyrians had ever faced. The space battle reached its climax when human forces surrounded the alien command center that controlled the defense of the entire star system. Morrison demanded the surrender of all Zephyrian forces and threatened to destroy the facility if his ultimatum was rejected. The alien commanders attempted to negotiate limited terms that would preserve some of their territory and independence, but Morrison rejected every proposal that would leave them capable of future threats against human settlements. The war would end with complete human victory, or it would continue until one species was extinct. Colonel Sarah Mitchell led the assault teams that captured the command center after a brief but intense battle in its corridors and chambers. Her soldiers had learned to fight effectively in zero gravity and confined spaces where conventional tactics were useless. Mitchell accepted the surrender of the surviving alien commanders and secured the control systems that regulated defense installations throughout the star system. With the command center under human control, the remaining Zephyrian forces found themselves cut off from coordination and support. Lieutenant Danny Cooper led the fighter squadrons that pursued fleeing alien vessels and prevented them from escaping to other star systems where they might reorganize for future attacks. Cooper pilots had orders to disable enemy ships whenever possible, but to destroy any vessel that refused to surrender. The pursuit operations continued for days as human forces tracked down scattered enemy units and forced them to capitulate. Cooper discovered that many alien crews were relieved to surrender rather than continue a war they no longer believed they could win. Dr. Helen Parker supervised the technical teams that secured alien research facilities and industrial installations throughout the star system. Parker was particularly interested in preserving Zephyrian scientific data and technology that could be useful for human development and defense. The capture of alien research data revealed that the Zephyrians had been studying other species throughout their region of the galaxy. Some of these species had been marked for conquest or extermination in future expansion campaigns. Parker shared this information with human intelligence services, who began reaching out to potential allies. The war officially ended when the Zephyrian Council of Commanders signed surrender documents that placed their entire species under human supervision and control. The aliens would be allowed to survive on reservation worlds, but they would never again possess the technology or organization necessary to threaten other species. President Stone announced the victory to human settlements throughout the galaxy and declared that the threat which had begun with the New Hope massacre was finally eliminated. Humanity had proven that peaceful intentions did not mean weakness, and that some acts of aggression would bring total retaliation. Captain Morrison visited the memorial that had been established for the victims of the New Hope colony ship and reflected on how much humanity had changed during the war. They had been forced to become something they never wanted to be, but they had succeeded in protecting future generations from the threat of extinction. The inscription on the memorial read that 50,000 innocent people had died to teach the galaxy that humanity would go to any length necessary to protect their own. The lesson had been learned and would not be forgotten by any species that considered humans to be easy targets for conquest or extermination. As human fleets began the long journey back to their homeworlds, they carried with them the knowledge that they were no longer the peaceful explorers who had ventured into space, hoping to make friends among the stars. They had become the guardians of human space and the defenders of any species that chose cooperation over conquest.